Rimma Boshernitsan, the founder and CEO of Dialogue. Welcome to 10 by 20, a series of 10 questions discussed in 20-minute dialogues with local and international leaders doing visionary work at the intersection of people, technology, and society. Hi, and welcome to 10 by 20. I'm thrilled to welcome today's guests, Leslie Salmon Jones and Jeff Jones, our first 10 by 20 with two people. Fair warning, today we may go over time, as going deep with two amazing humans takes a little bit of time. And by way of introduction, Leslie is an Alvin Ailey trained dancer, yoga instructor, wellness coach, and community activist. And Jeff is a multi-instrumentalist, composer, and engineer. And together they founded Afroflow Yoga, which grew out of the couple's exploration of healing and their African American and Caribbean heritage in West Africa, Haiti, and Jamaica. Afroflow Yoga is a combination of live music, dance, and yoga. And within the container of Afroflow Yoga, Jeff and Leslie bring circles of healing and build community. Welcome, Leslie and Jeff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So excited to have you guys.
Yeah.
So we always start off these 10 by 20s going back into the past a little bit and asking people about their childhoods and how they grew up influenced their work. So I'm curious, obviously there's two of you, you grew up very differently. And I'm just curious how did you come to this as individuals? And then we can talk about it more as a duo.
Sure. After you, Leslie.
Oh, thank you. So I grew up in Toronto, Canada, and I came from a family who's multicultural. Three of my grandparents were Jamaican, and the only grandparent I knew was my Scottish, Irish, Canadian grandmother, Violet Bell. And within our family, we had, I grew up in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, went to Black Heritage on the weekends. I used to go to Hebrew school with my friends. Went to an Anglican church, adopted into our family. We have a cousin who's Indigenous Canadian, and also a cousin who's from the Philippines. So we had all of the representation in our family. My mother was a nurse, and then out of the need for a lot of racism that we were experiencing and discrimination, because my parents are mixed race, she decided, she became a community activist. And from that, she founded a lot of organizations, and including the Urban Alliance, and helping a lot of the Black community with discrimination. And then she became a grassroots politician, and she was the first woman of color to be a Metro Council in Toronto. So in our basement, we had her campaign headquarters. And so she planted the seed for me that we could be an agent of change and transformation, transforming our communities. So that's the activism piece. My father had been orphaned, and he wanted to be a doctor, but when he was 3, but at that time, Blacks weren't allowed into university. So it wasn't until he was about 18 or 19, it's kind of an interesting story, but he had a jazz band. His aunt had raised the 6 kids, and he was the baby. And he basically was able to pay his way through med school. He got into the University of Toronto, one of the first Black medical students there. And he became a surgeon, and he was one of the pioneers in gastric bypass surgery for the morbidly obese. And because back then, the morbidly obese were discriminated against. A lot of doctors couldn't touch them. And so my dad could relate. And so I worked in his office when I was a teenager, and I really realized the importance of our health. I'd write up all the dictation, and the patients who would come into the office, completely transform their lives. And it was not cosmetically, it was for their health and their well-being. So those 2 seeds planted the roots for the work today.
That's amazing. Such a rich, deep, and specific examples of where kind of all the threads are coming together for you. I love that. What about you, Jeff?
With a story like that, I said to myself, I guess I should have gone first, all of an amazing heritage. But we are here in a house that I grew up in and my grandfather bought in 1914. So my family, we can go back to the 1800s with marriages that were sustained, which are an important part of your upbringing and things that you carry on. So we have a lot of family reunions, and there's a lot of history, and we were able to find a enslaved African girl, 10 years old, brought in 1820. That was my great-grandmother. She was about 10 years old. She had 13 kids, had obtained her freedom. And a lot of those kids end up becoming teachers and pastors on one side. And on another side, my dad was an amazing musician. So my musical roots go pretty deep. That bass that you see back there is a bass that my dad played with Billie Holiday, Sammy Davis Jr., Tom Jones, all these amazing. He was the first call bass player here at a place called Storyville. My mother was a coloratura soprano. They're both deceased. And my grandmother was in African-American music, in classical music. She was a mentor to Marian Anderson and Roland Hayes, which are classical legends from the turn of the century. She was born in 1891. And our Saturdays were getting together every Saturday night at my grandmother's house with all these folks. And in fact, Dr. King was a part of that lineage where my grandmother played at a church that he was a pastor at, and my uncle went to Boston University with him. So the musical roots, I could go on, but we only have so much time. So
that's amazing.
That's for starters. And in terms of my musical development, being on the road as a musician in decades where we would play 6 nights a week was amazing when we used to have so many clubs. So being a little older than I look, yeah, that was a great time to be a bass player playing a lot of amazing dance related music or even jazz. So
that's amazing. Well, and then how did your paths intersect in this, both in the work, and then how did you meet as well?
On a plane over Connecticut, May 20th, 1994.
Yes.
Like just sitting next to one another?
Yes. Oh, no. We were, Leslie was sitting already in her seat, and I walked down, and the plane was kind of empty. So you could basically sit where you wanted back then.
Mm.
Yeah, that story is a whole other.
Yeah, that's a whole other episode.
Yeah. It goes on and on. In fact, it's still going on. I think we're still on our first date.
But finding out how our artistry connected, and we were able to make fitness DVDs, and we worked on shows like Intercoiffure, which is a hair show. Leslie did the choreography for the participants and the models who were, mainly, showing off their hair. And I did the music for that. That was at, where was that?
Yeah, that was our first collaboration. I think that was in like 95, the year after we met, and then we collaborated on several different
So it kind of came natural, and we had, a community, different people who were connected magically in the industry. Yeah. So, and what was that? That was at the Ritz. So that was a pretty high-end gig for our first gig.
Yeah.
That's so great. But you guys were living in different places, right? At the time.
Yes, I was living in New York and Jeff was living in Boston. So we had that relationship going back and forth, Particularly Jeff did a lot of that, but I did some of that too.
Yeah.
And it was just great.
I was already a landlord and had, so I was living and just taking care of the house and working in engineering playing gigs.
And he put me to work on the land.
Nice.
Planted tree, we planted things. I love being in nature.
I think that was our first date.
Our first date, we planted
some hedges, some boxwoods.
That's how you know a relationship will be successful, right? If like the first date is like it goes well and like it's so obviously like not cohesive is not the right word, but like there's a synergy there that like Yeah. Feels really good. Oh, that's amazing. So I know we talked a little bit about like just a background of Afroflow yoga and what it's meant to do. But I'm curious, like, what are you seeing as the effects of the work, and like, what are the bigger questions that you guys are both trying to answer through this work, both for yourselves and maybe for the collective as well?
I think about Mo, our participant, when you see the active healing right in front of you, it's pretty amazing when somebody's we're in a inner circle, and we call it our healing circle, where the music is going on and people are kind of feeding the person energy. And we've seen people make amazing breakthroughs of where a lot of, particularly we had a veteran, people who have been through traumatic experiences, and it's just amazing to see what the music does. So being the musician and Leslie's voice guiding people gently through things, it's almost like being the puppet master, having been played in so many dance or church. I still play in church every Sunday, but I grew up doing that also. So you're feeding people, you see what they need at the right time, and it's like the vibrations come out in the healing, whether it's a veteran that suffered so much trauma, and finally she's free, because so many people are bound in their bodies. Once they break free, it's like, even from slavery, it's like breaking the chains and being up. And it was illegal for slaves to move and dance and drum at certain periods in time. So those are kind of physical restrictions probably in the DNA. So it's when people break through and loosen up, it's a lot of things free up. A lot of pain.
Yeah, and I'd also say to add to that, and to like more there's micro and there's macro. So when COVID happened, in the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all of the, we say the racial pandemic as well. So many people flooded to us because we were online, and there was so much need. There was like so much fear, anxiety, and questions, and grieving. And so we started hosting conversations after the flow, because we just knew that people needed to talk. They need to process. They need to be witnessed. They need to connect with other people. So we actually, from those discussions, we created 3 legs on our website. And one, it was the history of racism. We were finding that some people were coming, not all, but there are a few people who were coming who didn't even really have any awareness of racism. They've been in the reality that it's been a post-racial society, and not even really understanding the systemic roots in the history. So on our website, you have the history of racism, like all the resources in the world you could ever want. That's an exaggeration, but many resources point you in the right direction. And then there were the people who wanted to do something, the allies, people who really, really wanted to do something, but they didn't know what to do. So we created a resource for anti-racism resources. So this is the work, because that's like a real tricky place to be, because like people sometimes want to do so much, they're well-meaning, but then when they do, it can cause more damage and harm.
We've been there years ago, also doing racial workshops back in, what was it, 2015, 14, But you quickly learn that different groups have to do their work before they come into a space to bring, that energy. We're fortunate. We both grew up in, my neighborhood is probably more diverse than Leslie's. But we both, always had to navigate, the racial divide, even in a, diverse situation. So it's good. And our classes are quite diverse. So.
And then the third, I just want to finish. The third leg is the healing, because we had a lot of people, who were coming, who needed to, some people just wanted to be in the space by themselves to heal, BIPOC only space, so that so we created resources for that as well, because we know that people are coming. And then from there, I think the community was it was beautiful how it grew, together. There was like an understanding in a way. We got into a rhythm of how to navigate challenges. And what we're seeing now, so for 2 years, we actually donated. We would find different organizations that the community and we were very interested in, whether it was like the NAACP Legal Defense Fund to help people who, were in jail from protesting, or whether it was food banks or every and anything. And it was really pertaining to the moment of what was happening.
Yeah.
And so what would happen was when people would come on the mat, we donate like 10, 20, 40, whatever it was, to these different organizations. And that was like creating a culture of self-care and caring for others. Like how we continue to, we come onto the mat, and sometimes it could feel like, some people might have the feeling of, is this okay? Well, people are suffering, and so, and to have that, like, actually, this is the work that we do, so that we can help, so we can strengthen and fortify to be of service to others and actually help. So it's creating that culture. So that's what we really were focusing on.
Oh, I love that. And I mean, in essence, like a giving circle, which like from a philanthropic term, but it's still so intentional. Right. I love how you guys are threading the whole, the moment from where the idea comes to like the fruition of the giving to the organization. I'm curious, as you guys were talking, we were in Costa Rica together. I think one of the things, Leslie, you mentioned, or maybe both of you mentioned, was that you had traveled to Africa before starting AfroFlow Yoga and had like done an extensive trip, like where you did like tracing back your roots and really like connecting with the land. And that was the impetus and sort of the catalyst to also start AfroFlow. Can you tell me a little bit about what that trip was like, and like how did the idea for AfroFlow come out of that experience?
Well, I can even start from my first trip to West Africa was in 1991. One of my classmates, I told him early, probably in our junior year, I said, "Oh, when you go home, I'm inviting myself." He was from Sierra Leone. And then the day came, years later, I went and so I was able to start this whole curiosity of what people either knew or didn't know, and just diving in, just getting thrown into the pond over there, the different cultures and tribes. And then, of course, in 2007 is when we went. We had tried for several months or years to go, but one of our guides got sick. He was an older gentleman, but
Yeah. So exactly. So after 3 of our parents passed away, because we had been caregiving pretty much for a decade. The first decade of our marriage, we were caregiving. And so then we had a window of time where we weren't caregiving to go away for, we went for about a month and a half or so. And we traveled throughout West Africa, Ghana, Togo, Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, went to the slave dungeons. And I don't know if you've ever been to a place like Auschwitz or somewhere where genocide has happened, but it's quite an intense experience. I mean, they call them the slave castles, but they're dungeons. And when you go in, that's where they had the female dungeon and the male dungeon, and you can still, there's a stench in the walls. There's like, you can feel you just feel the energy for 400 years. 400 years. And so we learned about the methodologies of what it was to dehumanize people, because people from the continent of Africa are strong. Like they are not. I wouldn't mess with, I wouldn't go into someone's country and it would take a lot of work. And so people actually had a PhD to learn how to break people down. And so when we went there, it was like answering the prayers of our ancestors. Because if anyone's stolen from their home unwillingly, like the want is to come back home. So by standing there, it was like, feel like the ancestors saying, welcome back. And the people were saying, welcome back. It was so wonderful. Like the kids, and they're like, welcome, welcome. It was just so much love. And that was a homecoming. It was a real
That's amazing. And so then after that trip, is that were you thinking, how do we bring the healing to more people that are not going to be able to travel to heal their roots and educate? Or the beginning's a little bit different?
Well, what happened was in that process, it was a catalyst to our own healing because the pain came up. Generations of trauma. I'm a really empathetic person. And so to stand in the female slave dungeons right away, like when I got back, I had to do a lot of deep work on my womb. It's a longer story. But it was a 2-year journey of deep, deep womb healing. And from that, Jeff and I went to, and Jeff was like the most amazing partner through that whole thing. Like, amazing partner. And through that, it ended up, I went to Haiti to go under a sacred waterfall. We did a lot of ritual. We met some shamans from Zimbabwe named Mandaza. Another shaman from Burkina Faso named Patrice Melodomo Somé. He passed away last year. And then another woman who is like, she's almost like our marriage counselor. Like, she's a mambo. She's a Voodoo priestess. And she's great. Like anytime we're having some challenges, we'll go for a reading. And she's like, okay, well. And she knows us both. And she's like, maybe you could try this. Maybe you could. I went to Haiti to her temple, did some work. And Jeff and I, it's 2 years of deep, deep, deep healing work. From that, out of our own healing, that's when I actually was meditating on my vision. I had been invited to teach yoga and Afro-Caribbean dance in Sedona, Arizona at the Raw Spirit Festival. And then spirit ancestors, at that point, we had connected to our ancestors because we did all these rituals, and they said, this is what you're teaching. And this is what it's called. And then Jeff was like, and it's got to have live music. And so his ancestors were saying, this is what's going to happen. So our ancestors came together and are guiding us. Like they're constantly guiding us to say, okay, this is the wisdom, this is the knowledge we want you to put forth. And so we do it. Yeah.
That's amazing. What a journey. And it's still going, right? It's still evolving in how this, I'm sure nobody expected the pandemic to happen in the way that it did. And I think now your practice has another dimension to it. So I'm curious, as both individuals and partners in both life and business, when and how do you do your most creative work?
I guess in a lot of times it's in the moment when we can be with a group of indigenous youth, who have been, severely traumatized, and then you have to learn how to create the approach to that culture. Or we may be in Roxbury with Liz Walker's program, dealing with a lot of trauma where they have gun violence right in the same block that the church is on. So creating our healing circle is probably our most creative time. Or we may be in Bali, Indonesia with 250 people, and Leslie's able to get people moving in certain patterns, which is kind of amazing. It's almost like getting water to flow a certain way also. So yeah, to combine the healing and have people open to being not judged, and it's probably our creative juices going. how to approach these. Yeah, it's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
Whether what type of music, how because it can get pretty ruckus, how jazz, it's very dynamic, and then that's the flow dynamic, whether it's giving space or just listening.
Yeah, and being so whenever we show up for flow, we have certain preparation, but we're also we open to the stream of consciousness, and so I don't think we've never really said, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and this is how it's always just comes through. I mean, we might have a theme and an aspiration. But really what happens is the people who come are part of that collaboration, are part of the creativity. So I've heard Jeff come up with some phenomenal music. And I'm like, where did that come from? In the moment.
Yeah, totally. I mean, because singing and playing, because I'll sing some songs that I haven't sung before, played before. They'll just come up like something like Many Rivers to Cross or something like these songs that have so much meaning, it's like when you're crossing these rivers to get to a certain point in your life, and sometimes it gets pretty deep. You can get swept away by a good current. And so, I mean, and it can be other songs. Who knows? I might be doing something that has a deep African influence, or I might do something that has Earth, Wind, and Fire, because their messages are so amazing. And being a bass player, so I also play bass during our flow. Yeah. And drum at the same time.
Yeah, and so when people, it's a collaborative experience. So when people are there, they might say something that might inspire movement, and then Jeff follows that. And so it's just really completely, we're in it.
Or you might be with a group of Chinese people that don't even speak English, and we'll have an interpreter, and somehow after a few classes, they're leading and saying they're the same, like earth or sky, it's all related in the different practices, Yeah.
Well, I'm just picturing just my own expectations before doing the first session with you guys in Costa Rica. Yeah. I didn't know if Jeff was going to be on the instruments or also doing yoga, or like how did it all come together? And then for a long time, I didn't even like my experience was that I was like, this must be somehow like planned, right? Like the at least, because it's such flow between the two of you and also between the people in the class and both of you together. So it's just like a magical, something takes over the space that you both create. Yeah. And then it just takes on a life of its own. It's amazing.
Yes. Stream of consciousness.
Yes. And I would want to say that it's definitely, there is a container. So there's a structure to the container. And then there's flexibility within that. Mm-hmm. So whatever tends to happen within that, because there's like, people do want to feel safe. So we set that up, those parameters up, so that people feel held and safe. And then it's also a lot of the techniques that, and the skill set that we've learned, and we've been studying like the disciplines over the years that allow us to do that, like improv in that way.
Yes. Yeah. I was wondering, like, how does Leslie know the next thing that we're all going to be like asked to do or invited to do in these moments? It's really, I mean, it's great to be part of the sessions, because you don't even feel what's happening until you're done. And then you just realize that your vibration's been raised like significantly, and everything feels better, and the body is light. There's no tension anywhere. It's amazing. So on that note, are you guys ready for some rapid fire questions?
Sure. Okay. Just want to mention that it does have a base with Vinyasa, Kundalini, and different
dances of the African diaspora.
Yeah. But the dance is also so, like, I think sometimes with Vinyasa and Kundalini, it could feel like less grounded than the African piece of it, like the more traditional, like, sort of rootedness of the movements.
Yes.
And I think the combination of those two things, I felt like it confirmed to me that I was definitely like some sort of gypsy drummer person in a past life, and like definitely in the like Middle East, either in Brazil or like in the Middle East section of the world. And it was just so like, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe how alive I feel. And I was telling my friends who were there the week prior at this retreat where we met, the same thing. And it was really transformational. I really actually wish that we could just do like 2 weeks together. You know what I mean? Everyone else was fabulous too, but like the 2 weeks, it would have been an amazing, intensive, just to go deeper on that work.
Yeah.
But,
I'll be there next year, by the way, doing an intensive only Afro flow. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. For a week or for 2 weeks?
For a week. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Well, I'm going to do that. I've learned my lesson that I need to come for 2 weeks. So at least. Cool. Well, so we're going to jump into rapid fire. And I have just a few questions for you both. And whoever goes first doesn't really matter, but we want to do both of you at each stage. So when do you feel most connected to others? We'll start with, how about Leslie? We'll go with you first.
Definitely when I'm in the flow, in the circle, and we're sending love and people are sweating and crying and laughing. And that's when I feel the most connected.
Oh, you want my answer? Oh, I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. No, both of you.
Absolutely. When I find myself breathing deeply and the perspiration is just dripping off, I can see a pool of water down below, and I know I've taken us to a certain point. But of course, it can be gentle too. So don't think it out. That's definitely a moment when I feel like I'm out I'm actually running, because drumming is quite a good exercise, to put it mildly.
Definitely, yeah. When and where are you happiest?
Oh, well, when I'm in Costa Rica, teaching on the water with the love of my life, eating the most amazing food, feeling like strong with the most incredible people. I'd say that's pretty happy.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, yes, being together in any situation, just comfort knowing that somebody's got your back, and you found your soulmate.
That's awesome. What intersection of disciplines are you currently most fascinated by?
I would say that's a good question.
Neuroscience, and getting data to show, because a lot of people now feel like they have to justify it with the data when it's been there for generations, millenniums, of healing. So it's something that we're focusing on. Yeah, we've been really into that. Particularly, we were at the trauma conference last week. So the intersection of science and spirituality and how they're coming together is like really fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. What's your greatest regret?
I know I really made a decision when I was younger. I'm not going to have any regrets. I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to live with those mistakes. They're compost for nourishment. So I really don't have any regrets. It's like, it is what it is.
That's so freeing.
My only regrets is when I don't go for a nice long bike ride. Exercise, because I sleep better, and just getting exercise just does help. You don't have to worry about taking melatonin or something.
Definitely, yeah. And what's the one thing that you wish to pass down to the next generation?
Love.
Well, history. Because a lot of people don't know their history, don't know where they came from, don't know, and with that they make the same mistakes over again. So people can have true history.
That's beautiful.
History with love.
Yeah. Well, context too, and just a depth of understanding as you move forward in life too. Yeah. Like that's what we all can ask for. Well, thank you both so much for your time. It was so nice to see you again. It was such a pleasure. So much wisdom, so much to share. And I'm so happy that we were able to meet today.
Thank you. We're honored. So grateful to be here.
Thanks for tuning in to Dialogue's 10 by 20 interview series, where we ask 10 questions in 20 minutes to profile international leaders working at the intersection of people, technology, and society. That's all for today's episode. Like and subscribe below to get notified for our upcoming interviews. Follow us on Instagram at dialogue_co.